There's another simpler, more practical way to do this process of making a jar of tomato sauce that just works into your everyday life where you come home. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and it's a weekday evening and I'm making tomato sauce. And many of you have an image in your mind of making tomato sauce where it's this unbelievably elaborate experience where you bring in all the members of your family and you pick all the tomatoes, you have a giant pot over a giant fire and you do this and you do that and so on and so forth. And that's one way to do it. But there's another simpler, more practical way to do this process of making a jar of tomato sauce that just works into your everyday life where you come home, you have supper, and then you got a couple hours in the evening, and we spend one of those hours making a jar of tomato sauce. So let me show you how I do it, all right? Because it's a lot simpler. And you got more tomatoes, you know, this time of year, at least where I live, Nova Scotia, Canada, September. You've got more tomatoes than you can possibly eat. There's only so many tomato sandwiches and this, that, and the other thing you can eat with tomatoes, right? So, so I've got, this time of year, I got tomatoes coming out of the garden, and you know, these aren't on the camera frame. Let's put them here. So I got lots of different kinds of tomatoes, right? Every 2 days, I send one of my, I got a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. Every 2 days, I send them out to the garden. I said, pick every tomato you see that's pink or orange or red, or some combination of green and pink and orange and red, right? Just if it's only green, don't pick it, but if it's got any color, pick it. So they bring it in, and I put it on the counter here, and all I do is put a towel over them like this, and then monitor them day after day, sort of thing, right? So my understanding of how a lot of things like this ripen is that there's a gas that's given off that enhances the ripening. I mean, we always think of like having stuff vine ripen, and that's nice. But when we live in these colder climates, really it's that, I can't remember the name of it's called, but there's a gas coming off of the tomato. And if you just have them on a counter where you know, you're controlling, some people put them in a brown paper bag, we just put towels over them, whatever, right? But they'll ripen quite quickly like that. Right? Because when you're getting into September, especially where I live, what is it, September 22nd or September 23rd or something like that, every night, you know, like we're just getting closer and closer to a risk of frost where I live anyway. So these are all ready, and all I do is take every one of these that seems to be a little bit soft by feel, whenever I have enough that are in that state, right? I cut away any bad spot, like, so this one here, it's a nice, beautiful looking tomato, but it's got a bad spot right there, right? So you just cut away all the bad spots, right? And remove the, this sort of vegetative stem part, right? This green thing, right? Remove those. If you've got, a lot of these cherry tomatoes, and you can only eat so many cherry tomatoes, all you got to do is remove that, right? Remove the little green, remove the little green part, right? Remove the little green part like that. Boop, that's it, okay? Okay, so all you're doing to prep your tomatoes is you're removing the stem part and removing cutting out any part of the tomato that looks weird. All right? All right, let me show you the next stage. Once you've done that, you throw them in you get as many tomatoes together as is required to make a quart of tomato sauce. Roughly speaking, that's about 2 quarts. This here container holds about 2 quarts. That's about 2 liters for you metric people, right? So I'm going for a quart. It's not going to work out perfectly, right? But I'm going for about a quart of finished sauce. So because there's so much, this isn't geometrically, you know, perfect, right? So you get about double that volume, or at least 1.5 times that volume, right? This container, what I do is I take all the cut up tomatoes and the stem ones like this, and I throw it all in this container, right to the top. And I put a teaspoon of salt in. And then I bring it to a boil, and I give it a stir. Then I put the lid on and I let it simmer for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, half an hour, somewhere around there. It really, you know, like what you're waiting for is when you can tell by feel that every single tomato, in whatever state you've thrown it in, has gone completely soft. It's completely broken down, right? And that's what we have here. All the tomatoes are broken down and soft and so on and so forth. All right? I got some tomato on my shirt here. That's what we got down here. Let me show you a little bit closer. This is what I did last night, right? So the tomatoes sort of, you know, I threw it all in there with a teaspoon of salt, roughly about 2 liters, 2 quarts of just tomatoes. No water, just tomatoes, and a teaspoon of salt. You bring the heat up and you just stir it constantly. You just get a stir every now and then, and the water comes out of it. It makes its own water, okay? That's what you got, this big messy tomato stuff, okay? You do that, and you let it set for a few hours or overnight or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? I did this yesterday, but I could do it all in one night if I had enough time. But normally what happens is I put it all in the thing, I bring it to a boil, I put the lid on, I go to bed, and I deal with it the next night. Nothing, you know, this is all fine. It's all going to be fine. Then you get a potato masher or something like this, right? You don't want to use a hand blender, okay? You want to use a potato masher, or a smushy thing like this. You do not want to use a hand blender. You don't want to break the tomato seeds, right? And you don't want to break the skin. We want to smush this all up and process the tomatoes as best we can, but we don't want to pulverize the seeds, and we don't want to have little bits of skin in there as well, because those are the seeds. If you actually pulverize them, like send them through a grinder, they make the sauce a bit bitter. And the skin, if you don't get it out, the skin's perfectly edible and all that sort of stuff, and it's got all kinds of flavor, but the texture of the skin's a bit strange, and it makes these weird sort of pointy things in your sauce. And it's perfectly edible, and you can have the skins in your sauce, but you're going to find that they're off-putting to guests and so on and so forth. So I'll leave that up to your sensibility. Anyway, all we're doing right here is we're just mushing up, right? We brought this to a boil and we simmered it for 20 minutes, half an hour, and so forth. And now just using the potato masher, we're taking the really soft tomatoes and just making them even softer, right? And this is why the potato masher is better, because it's not breaking up the seeds, right? I mean, if you're just swallowing a seed, it's no big deal, but if you have seeds that are like shredded and smashed and pulverized, they're not appetizing, and they will affect the flavor of your tomato sauce. That's why when you buy tomato sauce, or even canned tomatoes, you may find that some taste better than others. And that's because some of them, they're just all machine processed, and those seeds are being shredded up by some machine, and it's very efficient, very cost effective for the company that's doing that. But for you, the end user, they're making a sort of inferior product. So I mean, our end product, the sauce we're going for, it doesn't matter if there's seeds in it. That's not the point. You don't want the seeds ground up, shredded up, smashed up, right? If they're just there, they're going to go in you, they're going to go out of you. Who knows? They might even result in tomatoes growing somewhere, right? But you don't want to be smashing the seeds up, because they're, the flavor, right? So I think we've done a pretty good job here of pulverizing this. And you can see the texture of this has changed. This looks like a tomato sauce now, but all the skins are in there. right? And the seeds are in there. And just the little end bits and little bits of this and bits of that, you know, weird stuff like that. Now this is all fine. This all can all be used as a tomato sauce right now as is. But if you want it to be extra nice, you got to do a couple other things. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I got this wire spoon. This is something you use for like deep frying for like Asian cuisine, right? It's just this very wide space. Each of these holes is maybe, 3/4 of a centimeter, 7 millimeters, or maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/3 of an inch diameter little holes, okay? So it's a pretty loose sieve, all right? And I got a fine sieve here as well. That's just what I got, all right? So all I'm gonna do is pick it up, give it a little lift. There's machines that will do all of this for you, all right? But you don't need the machines. We got like $5 worth of gear here. That's all we need to do this. All right, just give it taps like that. Okay. We're letting gravity and time do a lot of our work, right? All I'm doing is just scooping out skins, basically. There's some of the seeds, but a lot of the seeds are falling through the spoon, right? Because this is not a very tight spoon, right? So I'm just doing this until, you know, it doesn't seem to be like I'm gathering anything, right? I'm still gathering skins here, so there's still work to be done, but I'm almost done. I've just about gathered everything there is to gather. And if you're not perfect with this process, that's fine too. It doesn't have to be perfect. Everything's going to be heated up. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it, right? And if you don't want to waste anything, you can probably use this stuff for something. It's still food. It's still completely edible. You can put it in a soup. You know, you could probably take this and, you know, stick it in a container and throw it in a soup for later. It's pure flavor, right? Okay, so we've lost maybe, you know, 1/3 of the volume that was in this bowl. Okay, it was about this full, and now it's a little bit less full, but we've still got, you know, I don't know if you can see that, but we've still got a good amount, right? So this is the tomatoes with the salt, and this basically the skins and all the firmer parts removed. Okay. So I'm going to put that on the stove and bring it to a boil. Okay, I'm just going to put it on high, and I'm going to get a spoon going there, and I'm just going to stir it. This here, stuff here, there's water coming out of it. So all I'm going to do with this sieve and this bowl is just work it and try to get every little bit. You know, it's going to take a minute for that to come up to heat, right? Now, I mean, I'm here and it's after work, and normally if I wasn't on camera, I'd have these on, and I'd be watching some podcast and learning something, right? That's kind of how I do things, right? It's never wasting a moment, right? There's always something new to learn. Anyway, while that's coming to a boil, all I'm doing here is working on this, trying to, I've already got an extra couple ounces of liquid out of that now. I'll put that in there, right? I'll just keep working on this. This is so easy when you're just doing like, you know, a quart jar at a time, right? And I mean, I'm just, you know, if I wasn't filming a video, I'd be entertaining myself. I'd be listening to some documentary about the history of something or some other thing, or listening to some inspiring speech or whatever, right? Right. So this to me is not an overwhelming proposition, turning my tomatoes into tomato sauce, right? I'm just making sure that a thing that I've spent time, there's another couple ounces there. I'm just making sure that something I've spent time and energy growing is not going to waste, right? Again, I can use this. This stuff can go in a soup. You could take this, just put it in a little plastic container, and the next time you make soup, you throw it in for your stock. It's all good. Nothing gets wasted, right? That's the gardener's motto. Don't throw anything away. Everything has a use. Even if it doesn't have a use, you can compost it and it still has a use, right? All right, so I think that's about as far as I can take that. So I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm just going to monitor the pot over here. And once it comes to a boil, I'll come back and see you then. One more thing I forgot to mention. When I've got the sauce and it's been strained and all that sort of stuff, and I'm bringing it up to boil, I take some sprigs of herbs. This here, I've got some nice basil. Just throw that in like that, okay? Stems and all, don't worry about that. We'll fish it out afterwards. You don't have to be fussy about it. You know, after it's boiled for a minute, all the petals, all the leaves will basically fall off of the stems, and they'll stay in the mixture. And you can just fish the stems out, no problem, right? All right, so that's been, you know, we brought it up to a good boil, and there's no question that this has been boiling, all right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish out the basil. A little bit hot, but whoa, man, that's hot. Fish out the basil. Right. Some of the leaves have broken off, and some of them are still attached. All right, so now the basil's gone. I mean, you could leave it in there, but that's all up to you. It's really a question of your judgment. There's one more little bit there, I see. That gone. And the longer you leave that boil, the more probability the leaves will break off the basil. But anyway, there's plenty of basil leaves in there and plenty of basil flower in there. Okay, or not flower, plenty of basil flavor in there. All I can smell in the house. This smells like a beautiful tomato soup right now. Basically tomato and basil and just perfectly salted. I could completely enjoy this with some crackers or fresh bread just as is, or adding maybe a couple tablespoons of tomato paste to thicken, and so on, right? Anyway, this is ready to can, okay? Let's go to the next step. All right, so I got my boiled sauce. Still quite runny, doesn't matter, okay? And my jar. This is all about making sure that the tomatoes that I grew in June, July, August, September are available for me as a cook in September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, right? Thumb's getting a bit cooked there, so I'm just going to reposition. Wrap this thing around my thumb. Getting a little bit cooked there. Okay. You could pour this in, but you know I'm doing this in front of a camera, so I'm trying to be methodical. Now, when you're doing this, it almost never works out to, you know, perfectly. So I've got more sauce than will go in this jar. That's totally fine, right? I've got maybe half a jar's leftover sauce here. I'm just gonna, I'll put that in a container, put it in the fridge. The next time I do up a batch, I'll add that to it towards the end, heat it up, right, and recan it then. These will be ready in a couple days, right? So it's no big deal, but basically you just put that aside, or just use it right away in your cooking and so forth. But basically I've got, you know, I still have some in here, right? I got some left over. I just put that in a container in the fridge, and the next time I have enough ripe tomatoes to make a batch to fill a jar, right? I add this to it and it goes in the jar. All right, so right now we're up to the neck. We're like, what is that? Less than half an inch from the neck, all right? So I'm gonna put the little thing on there. Once I have this thing on, I like to hold it down and just dry everything off, okay? These lid parts are very cheap and easy to replace, but these rings, they never sell them on their own. They always sell them with the lids. So you basically don't want to get these wet. If these rings stay dry, they don't rust. If they get wet, they rust. All right, so you put the ring on like this, and you basically 2-finger tighten, right, like that. That's it. Now you take this and you put it in a hot water bath for, put it in water so that it's literally over the top of it. You get a nice high jar and put it in the, you can put this in your fridge and use this within the next 2 or 3 weeks and it'll be fine, okay? But just with the lid on like this, you cannot, with confidence, expect this to store indefinitely. There's risk of pathogens being in there, okay? If you want this to be a long-term storage type thing, then you need to put this in a water bath, and you need the water to be higher than the top of the jar. You need to bring that water to a boil, and you need to let it boil for 15 minutes, 10, 15, I can't remember what the number is, but it's like 10 or 15 minutes, okay? If you're gonna do long-term storage, okay? If your plan is to have this next week or the week after that, stick it in the fridge, you should be fine. Anyway, that's what I'm not gonna belabor this video with showing you the canning process. There's plenty of really good YouTube resources. Maybe I'll put a couple links in the description box of this video on good videos on proper canning practice. I'm about to do that right now with this jar. But anyway, once you get that done, you just mark on the jar the year and the month, so you know when you canned it up, right? But yeah, that's what I'm gonna do with these, and I'm just gonna keep doing that until the frost comes and I'm out of the tomato business. But this is just a great way to take your tomatoes, this time of year, if you're in a situation like myself, you've got more tomatoes than you can possibly deal with in terms of just incorporating the meals, eating tomato sandwiches at 10:30 at night, and all that sort of stuff, right? You can only eat so many tomatoes. So you can them up, and then you've got them, and they'll last, right? You can have them later on. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden, have fun in your kitchen. Thanks for watching.